It all started with a letter, not one from a lobbyist, a politician, or a general, but from a 27-year-old military nutrition officer named Lieutenant Rachel Myers. It wasn't flashy or overly formal. Just a simple sheet of paper, neatly typed, signed in blue ink. But the words carried weight. "Dear Mr. President," it began, "I challenge you to try one of our military MREs, meals ready to eat. Not at a press event. Not for the cameras. Just you, sitting down like one of us." It was sincere, honest, and most of all unexpected. Stationed at Fort Elidge, a quiet but vital base tucked away in rural Virginia, Rachel had written the letter on a rainy night after a grueling week of field testing and nutrition planning. Her soldiers had spent days in the mud, pushing through training exercises designed to simulate war conditions. Tired, cold, and hungry, one of them had cracked a joke. "This beef stew tastes like betrayal." It made her laugh. Then it made her think. What would a president say about this food? She never expected an answer. 3 days later, her phone rang. An unfamiliar voice greeted her. "Lieutenant Myers, this is the White House. The president read your letter and he has just one question. What's for dinner?" By sunrise the next day, Fort Elidge was buzzing. Soldiers murmured in disbelief. Secret Service agents swept through the grounds. Barricades went up. Schedules were cleared. Donald J. Trump, the former president, was really coming. And not with cameras or speeches, but with boots, a windbreaker, and a curiosity that couldn't be faked. Rachel didn't have time to worry. She had logistics to manage, a meal to prepare. Not a catered spread, but a genuine MRE, straight from the field. No silverware, no chef. Just a brown plastic pouch, a self-heating pack, and a table surrounded by young men and women who'd signed up to serve. When Marine One touched down, dust spiraled across the helipad. Soldiers snapped to attention. Rachel stood straight, her uniform crisp, her nerves steeled. Trump approached not as a politician but as a guest. He smiled, extended a hand, and said, "You're the one who invited me to lunch? I like your style." Inside the tent, 6 brown MREs sat stacked on a folding table. No cameras. No cue cards. Just Rachel, Trump, and a few wide-eyed troops who couldn't believe what they were seeing. One of them, Private Tony Vasquez, 19 years old and fresh out of boot camp, tried not to tremble as Trump took a seat beside him. The president leaned in. "You look nervous," he said. "Don't worry, I'm scared of this beef stew too." Laughter broke the ice. And just like that, something shifted. Gone was the fanfare. Gone was the spectacle. What remained was something quieter, something real, a moment of connection, unexpected, unscripted, and unforgettable. And in the middle of it all stood Rachel, watching the room soften, unsure where this moment would lead, but knowing one thing for certain. Everything had changed. The air at Fort Elidge crackled with anticipation as Rachel led Trump toward the mess tent. No red carpet, no formal speeches, just rows of folding chairs, camouflage-clad soldiers, and a humble setup of brown MRE packets lined up on a plastic table. Trump walked with a kind of curiosity rarely seen in public officials. His usual bravado was present, yes, but softened. Rachel noticed it. Maybe it was the absence of cameras. Maybe it was the mud on his boots. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the weight of where he was. Inside the tent, 5 young service members sat upright, trying to hide their nerves. Rachel had handpicked them, not for their ranks or medals, but for their honesty. She knew they'd speak their minds. Trump greeted each one, shaking hands, cracking jokes. "All right," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Where's this legendary stew I keep hearing about?" Rachel smiled and handed him a brown pouch. "Beef stew." Heated with hope and sealed with sarcasm. He laughed. "Now that's branding." As he fumbled with the heater bag, trying to follow the printed instructions, Rachel stepped aside to give him space. It was a surreal feeling to watch the president trying to heat up the food like any other rookie. And somehow right. Private Jenkins leaned in. "Sir, it helps if you yell at it a little." "That's what we do." Trump chuckled. "Yell at it, huh? I've yelled at tougher things." Laughter filled the tent. Slowly, barriers were falling. As steam rose from the pouch, Trump sniffed the stew, then took a bite. The entire tent seemed to pause. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully. "Then it tastes like discipline." Even more laughter. But then, something shifted. Trump placed the pouch down and looked around. You know, sitting here, this doesn't feel like a photo op. It feels like something real. Rachel nodded. That was the idea. What do they feed you out there on deployment? Trump asked, gesturing toward the group. Same stuff, said Corporal Harris. Sometimes colder. Always necessary. Rachel spoke up. And always underfunded. That caught his attention. Explain. She did. She talked about logistics, budget cuts, the science behind nutritional planning, the reality of building resilience with low-cost meals. She didn't hold back. And he didn't interrupt. Then came the personal stories. Private Vasquez shared how an MRE was the last meal he ate before losing a close friend in a firefight. Corporal Harris spoke of how, during hurricane deployment, she rationed peanut butter crackers for 3 days to feed others. Trump listened. Really listened. You think about this kind of stuff in the Oval Office, he said. But it's all numbers and charts. Sitting here, it's different. Rachel nodded. Numbers don't have faces. Or boots in the mud. The former president grew quiet. He turned toward Rachel. So why'd you invite me? She hesitated, then answered, because I wanted someone in power to understand what this food really means. Not just calories. It's connection. It's survival. It's humanity. He nodded slowly. You got more than stew on the menu today, Lieutenant. Just then, a young soldier handed him a handwritten letter. Sir, it's from my granddad. He served in Korea. Said if you ever came around, I should give it to you. Trump took the letter carefully. Opened it. Read the faded ink. He didn't say anything right away. Then, he said to lead with your ears, not just your mouth. That's good advice. For the first time in the tent, no one smiled. There was only respect. As the sun began its slow descent beyond the Virginia tree line, casting golden light over Fort Elidge, a hush fell over the assembled soldiers. President Trump stood once again in front of the troops, not with a podium, not with a prepared speech, but shoulder to shoulder with Lieutenant Rachel Myers, Private Tony Vasquez, and the others who had just shared their rations and their stories. There was something different in his voice now. Gone was the familiar bombast. What remained was something quieter, more grounded. I came here expecting to taste a meal, he began, his voice carrying over the stillness. But what I got was a lesson on courage, service, and humility. He looked at Rachel, then at the others. They say leadership is about commanding. But today I was taught something else. Sometimes leadership is about listening. The soldiers listened, too, now fully attentive. Not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Trump held up a brown MRE bag. This doesn't look like much. No one writes home about beef stew in a pouch. But I'll remember this meal for the rest of my life. Not for the taste, but for what it stood for. For what you all stand for. A few soldiers clapped quietly. Others simply nodded. The emotion hung in the air like the last rays of the sun. Rachel's eyes burned, but she blinked back the tears. She wasn't going to cry. Not today. Then, Trump turned to Colonel Bradford. You've got a fine team here, Colonel. And you've got a fine leader in Rachel. Bradford grinned. Sir, we've known that for a while. Still, Trump continued, recognition matters. That's why, as of today, I'll be recommending Captain Myers for a Defense Service Commendation. Gasps and a round of applause filled the space. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. You earned it, Trump said. Not for feeding me, but for feeding something far more important. Morale. She finally managed a quiet. Thank you, sir. As the visit wrapped up, Trump took a slow walk down the line of soldiers, shaking hands, offering words of encouragement. There were no cameras, no press, just people. People who had just shared something deeply human. Before boarding Marine One, Trump paused one last time. You reminded me today, he said, that real power isn't found in palaces or offices. It's found right here, in the dirt, in the tents, in the people who show up when it matters most. With that, he saluted the formation one final time, then boarded the helicopter. Back in the tent, Tony Vasquez sat staring at the presidential coin he'd been given, still in shock. Rachel sat beside him, still absorbing everything. I never thought one meal could change anything, Tony murmured. Rachel smiled softly. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest echoes. As the blades of Marine One stirred the air and lifted the president into the fading sky, something lingered in the dust, a bond forged over a simple meal, a shared truth, and the quiet kind of respect that didn't need headlines.